Judges chapter 5. Verse 1. Mark.
Then Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying that the leaders led in Israel, that the people volunteered,
Okay.
bless the Lord. I got tomorrow.
This is verse 1. Chapter 5, verse 1.
Okay.
All right. Now, this song, right, then sang Deborah and Barak, right? The song. This is one of 10 great songs recorded in the canon of Scripture. 10 songs. And you can see the list of the songs here. The Song of the Sea, Exodus chapter 15. The Song of the Well, Numbers 21. The Song of Moses, Deuteronomy 32. The Song of the Sun, that's from Joshua chapter 10, when the sun stood still and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. The Song of Hannah, famous one, 1 Samuel chapter 2, right? The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. By the way, Hannah is the first person to call the Lord of hosts. The first one to call him the Lord of hosts. The Song of David, 2 Samuel 22. Song of the Sabbath, Psalm 92. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's, the whole book, obviously. And then finally, the Song of the Lamb in the 15th chapter of Revelation. So 10 songs in the Scriptures. Verse number 2. Lane.
When the princes in Israel take the lead, when the people willingly offer themselves, praise
Okay,
the Lord.
pause real quick. Israel is praising Yahweh. By the way, whenever you read the Bible, the English Bible, the name Lord is in all capital letters. That's the divine name, the Abrahamic, Mosaic, covenant, strong name, Yahweh. No one really knows how to say it. I asked a good friend of mine, who's now passed away, Anson Rainey. I said, if heaven exists, because he was Anson. If heaven exists, and you got to the pearly gates, what would you ask God? You know? And he said, I'd ask him how to pronounce his name, because no one knows for sure, right, how to say that name. The Yod He Vav He. So whenever it's in all caps, that's that. The Abrahamic Mosaic. The English transliteration would be Jehovah. That's the English transliteration, even though there's no J sound in the words of the Bible. Okay? So yeah. Nevertheless, Israel's praising Yahweh because Sisera, the oppressor, is dead. The reason for the prayer. His chariot forces have been put to rout. And the Canaanite stronghold of Hatzor has now faded in power. And you can see Hatzor on the map right here. It was located right on the international highway, the Great Trunk Route. In many of your textbooks, that route that goes from Egypt through the land bridge of Israel past Damascus, following the Tigris and Euphrates rivers down to eventually Ur. By the way, Ur just means city in Akkadian, just city. Hatzor was right smack dab on that main route going to that main place. And it's now, at one time, right, it was the center, the epicenter, the religious, administrative, political, military kind of hub for the Canaanites in the north, in the Galilee. And it has now faded in power, which means now hopefully the Israelites can come out of their mouse holes up in the mountains, up in Shingletown and Manton. Now they can come down from there, come down to the valley because the chariot forces, the oppressors are gone. And now, hopefully, you can have some real opportunities. Some economic, agricultural, all these kind of different opportunities can now come because the cat's away. Now the mice can come down and play. Okay. Verse number 3. Chapter 5, verse 3. Bob.
Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes. I will sing to the Lord. I will sing praise to the Lord God of Israel.
Okay. This chapter was sung, and it was originally put in metrical form, which would have made the song easily committed to memory. And that's one of the main reasons why ancient poetry was orally transmitted relatively unchanged over long periods of time. In fact, there's a thesis that was originally from the late 70s, originally written in French, but it is translated into English. And her thesis is that not only portions, but the whole Hebrew Bible was put to metrical form, rhythm, meter, and it could therefore be more easily memorized. And it's a nice, for sure, like some parts, like right, Habakkuk chapter 3, right? A prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet, upon Shigionoth. Well, who knows what Shigionoth is? It could be a metrical form, something like that, you know. But for sure, as we saw in verse number 1, there's 10 songs recorded in the scriptures, in the canon of scripture. Okay? So it's a song that would have been orally transmitted and easily memorized. Just like we easily memorize songs, more than any kind of, and poems, right? More than anything else, it's easy. Chapter 5, verse 4, Rob.
Lord, when thou wentest out as seer, when thou marchest out of the field of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens dropped, the clouds also dropped water.
In verse 5.
The mountains melted from the Lord, for the Lord, even that Sinai from before the Lord God of Israel.
Okay, there are numerous parallels to this portion, verses 4 and 5. There are numerous parallels found throughout the whole canon of the Old Testament. Edom, if you look at a list of the arch rivals of Israel throughout the Old Testament, Esau or Edom is like almost in every list. And whenever they're in the list, they seem to be the paradigm, the prime chief example of the arch rival, the adversary of Israel. Okay? Not only that, whenever the divine warrior, because this is how God is being portrayed here as a divine warrior, whenever the divine warrior shows up on the scene, all of creation melts, like we see here. All of creation is, even in the New Testament, right? Like in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Same package, same idea. The word for melt there in 2 Peter 3:10 is in Greek is luo, transliterated L-U-O, which means to unleash or to like let loose, something like that. So he's holding it all together, right? But when he comes the second time, he'll let it loose, unleash it. And it's the same motif, package, picture painted here when the divine warrior shows up on the scene. All of creation just becomes let loose. Okay? All right. Chapter 5, verse 6. We'll go with verse 6. Mark.
In the days of Shamgar, the son of Enan, in the days of Jael, the highways were deserted, and travelers went by roundabout ways.
The previously mentioned non-Israelite mercenary Shamgar from our last session, he provided security for Israel. He was a buffer zone for the Israelites on the Egyptian payroll, Ramses II. And he was, as it were, by kind of default, working for Egypt, warding off the sea peoples coming on cart and foot and ship from the Eastern Mediterranean seaboard. And honor is also given to Yael. By the way, Yael is a clipped form of Yahweh and Elohim. So just cut those two words in half, Yahweh and Elohim, take the first part of each word and that's her name. So Yahweh is God, basically, what her name literally means. So honor is also given to Yael, because Israel finally, during her time, became masters of the pivotal valley of Jezreel. And why is that important? Because it provides, the valley of Jezreel provides all those tremendous natural resources, the wheat, the barley, the fields, the springs, the wells, all those kind of goodies. And also, if you can control that, then you can control all the routes. So kind of think of maybe it as like a Sacramento, the Valley of Jezreel. Okay? That's where 5, 80, 99, all of those routes, right? The hub, the capital of the Galilee, right? And during her time, because they warded off the forces of Sisera, now they control that, and they're going to prosper. Verse number 7, length.
Village life in Israel ceased until I, Deborah, arose a mother in Israel.
Okay. The oppression of the Canaanite military forces in the Galilee, in the north, forced many or most of the Israelite tribes out of their allotted territories. And those allotted territories were rich with opportunities, they were rich with natural resources and all these kind of things, but because the cat is not away, the mice cannot play, and so they have to go up into the high hill countries, into their little footholds, right, in the mountains, right, not in the pivotal valley. So that in verse 7, therefore the inhabitants of the villages ceased. And that's why they ceased. It's because the cat was there and the mice couldn't play. Verse number 8, Bob.
They chose new gods. Then there was war in the gates. Not a shield or spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel.
Okay, so Israel chose new gods after the death of Joshua and after the death of the ruling elders of the first generation of Israelites after the conquest. So once they got into the land, Joshua died, and the other ruling elders of the different tribes, the sheiks, died, then they began to choose new gods. Now, the apostasy of Baal worship and Asherah is associated with the intermarriage among the Canaanite women. We saw that, or we will see that in Judges 13 with Samson. Now, remember, guys, the ancients, no matter who you were, you lived in a cause and effect world. A cause and effect world. The reason it has not rained, they think, is because we've sinned. Okay? On and on and on. Now, the effect of war and instability in Israel was rooted or based in their thought and practice in their rejection of Yahweh worship. There's an interesting kind of modern version of this in a book called Face to Face or Mouth to Mouth. One of the two. I think it's Face to Face. That would probably be more proper because Mouth to Mouth is the Hebrew rendering of the English Face to Face. But it's written by a Christian journalist, Bill Croning, and he worked in the White House for many, many years as a journalist, and he wrote a book where he went back to pre-Nixon and traced, according to him, every time there was an anti-Israel policy from the White House. According to him, the effect was the same day, or the next day, or something close to that. There was some kind of economic or natural or military disaster in the United States, or related to the United States, a cause and effect. And this is the kind of world that these guys live in now. The new gods they chose were primarily him, Baal. Baal could be, this is obviously Baal in his humanistic form. The left foot of Baal is always in front of the right foot. That's probably a twofold statement. Number one, he's stepping into eternity every year, right? In the summertime when it's hot out and it's dry, Baal goes underground to the underworld, right? And then he'd come up, right? About close to this time of year, because he's the god of rain. And that's why his hand is in that position. Not only is it a striking position to crush his enemies, but he's throwing lightning bolts, right? You know, the Nike logo icon, Baal had an icon or logo, it would be a lightning bolt. Everyone associated that with him, which is kind of interesting because when Elijah's on Mount Carmel battling the prophets of Baal, how does God, Yahweh, answer Elijah? With a lightning bolt, which just sends him, he's crazy, he just goes, he wants to commit suicide down on Mount Sinai, he's done. he's done. So not only is it probably a religious statement, you're stepping into eternity, but it's also probably a position of strength. It's a position of, it's much more difficult to move someone when they're in that kind of strong position like that, right? Just it's kingly kind of position. So there's Baal. Verse number 9, Ron.
My heart is toward the governors of Israel.
That's okay, we can come back.
My heart is toward the governors of Israel that offer themselves willingly among the people. Bless you, the Lord. Sorry,
Okay,
I came on through different.
that's okay. That's okay. Okay, the heart. We're talking about the heart momentarily. Now, guys, when you do a survey of the scriptures, the heart, when spoken of figuratively, is mentioned over 800 times. Over 800. In the world of the Bible, there is no geographical distance between the heart and the mind. They're one and the same. The people in the world of the Bible consider the heart to be the control, the inner control center of the person. You can see from Proverbs 4:23, right? Above all else, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it. It's the location of human character and their thought and practice. A good man, in Luke 6:45, a good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. An evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. It is also the aspect or the portion of man wherewith God seems to be most concerned. And this comes from 1 Samuel 16:7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height. This is Saul, obviously, for I have rejected him. The Lord sees not as man sees, for man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks upon the heart. So that's the aspect, apparently, of man wherewith God is most concerned. The heart served as the seat of all spiritual, moral, intellectual, emotional, all those aspects of man's life. Okay. And then just as a footnote to that verse, we read about the governors of Israel here. I think we should understand these people to be like the sheiks, the leaders of the clans, and the leaders of the different tribes of the Israelites. Okay. Verse number 10, Mark.
You who ride on white donkeys, you who sit on rich carpets, and you who travel on the road, sing.
Having just mentioned the governors, or the sheiks of the Israelite clans, it is therefore inferred here, I think, that only the aristocracy, is that how you say it? Aristocrats? Yeah, the aristocrats, right?
Aristocracy.
Yes, aristocracy. I keep thinking of the Aristocat movie. So,
That's the cartoon.
yes, exactly. Only they apparently were permitted to ride upon donkeys in the world of the Bible. Apparently. We see that in Numbers 22:21 with Balaam. We see it, we'll see it later in the book of Judges. We see it in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9, the prophecy about Jesus riding the donkey. And we see it with Jesus riding the donkey. So yeah, it seemed that it was some kind of status symbol, right? Some kind of status symbol to ride a white donkey. Okay, verse 11, Lane.
The voice of the singers at the watering places, they recite the righteous acts of the Lord, the righteous acts of his warriors in Israel. Then the people of the Lord went down to the city gates.
Okay, so I think we're to understand the deliverance from archers near wells as referring to the cessation, the stopping, the ceasing of the practice of your enemies or your adversaries lying in ambush near springs and near wells for the purpose of stealing or seizing your flocks and herds when you will bring them there to water them. And we see an example of that custom of thievery in the Torah in Exodus 2:17. And so the shepherds came and drove them away, the daughters of Reuel or Jethro. Right? But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flocks. So we see that practice was a prominent practice. But we see here that now the Israelites are delivered from that prominent crime. The well in the worlds of the Bible was often the magnet, the gathering point for the community. Okay, this is where, like John 4, okay, right? This is where news was shared at the well. It's where relationships were made, Genesis 24, with Isaac. Hospitality is shown, Exodus 2. Songs are sung, Numbers 21. Friendships were made, like I talked about in John chapter 4. So when you, depending on the context, when you read about wells in Scripture, think of them in those terms. You know, it's like kind of sort of like today, like, you know, where do people meet and talk in the office? At the water cooler, right? That's what they do. They share the news and the gossip of the weekend and what you did at the water cooler. It's kind of the same thing. Kind of the same thing. Okay. Verse 12, Bob.
Awake, awake, Deborah. Awake, awake. Sing a song. Arise, Barak, and lead your captives away, O son of Obinadab.
Okay, this is interesting now. Okay, like the current context we're in Judges chapter 5, the only other time in the Scriptures, the literary device of the repetition of the word awake, awake takes place, the only other time it happens is in the same context, is in Isaiah's section on the redemption of Israel and the punishment of Israel's oppressors. Very nice. In Isaiah 51:9. Awake, awake, arm the Lord, clothe yourself with strength. Awake, as in the days gone by, as in generations of old. Was it not you who cut Rahab to pieces, who pierced that monster through? Okay, very nice. Okay, verse number 13. Ron, you got that one, please?
And he made him that remaineth, hath dominion over the nobles among the people. The Lord made me have dominion over the mighty.
Okay, so because of the military upset over the forces of Sisera and the ceasing of the strength and the power of Hatzor, the Israelite tribes now they're the masters of their own domain. Now they have authority, judicial authority, over much of the remaining Canaanite city centers, the Canaanite enclaves of influence in the north, and now the Israelites are able to provide military forces to defend their own interests, to expand their borders, and to punish any Canaanite rebellion for a season. For a season. Verse 14, Mark.
From Ephraim, those who rule in or is in Amalek came down, following you, Benjamin, with your peoples. From Machir, commanders came down, and from Zebulun, those who wield the staff of office.
Okay, so this account, guys, in Judges chapter 5, this marks the very first time since Israel has been in the land after the conquest of Joshua, which could be, maybe, Garstein is correct, like 200 years, maybe. So this could be the first time in maybe like 200 years that the tribes actually united together in a common effort to overthrow the Canaanite oppressors. Verse 15, Lane.
The princes of Issachar were with Deborah. Yes, Issachar was with Barak, rushing after him into the valley. In the districts of Reuben, there was much searching of heart. Okay,
the princes of Issachar. The description of the landscape of the Valley of Jezreel, which has been allotted to Issachar, okay? Originally, the Valley of Jezreel is under the allotment of Issachar. That landscape is best described or illustrated in Genesis 49, 14 and 15. Issachar is a raw-boned donkey lying down among the sheep pens. When he sees how good is his resting place and how pleasant is his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and submit to forced labor. Okay? It's described as a resting place. It's described as a pleasant land. It's so pleasant that Jezreel, the Valley of Jezreel, literally means Yahweh sows, like Yahweh sows seed. It's so productive and so pleasant. Now, empirical, that would be cats in our cat and mice world, and local interest, those are the mice, in control of the valley, the pivotal valley, goes back to the beginning of recorded campaigns. Because the primary reason is on all of Highway 80 that went through the sacred bridge, the land bridge of Israel, this was the ideal military staging theater or ground. Now, Issachar is outmanned, Issachar is totally outnumbered, and he did not possess any of the necessary resources like weapons, chariots, or anything like that to inherit or to maintain the valley. The valley is huge. It has 7 entrances and or exits, and Highway 80 runs right through it. So they were just overrun, guys, by the cats. They just didn't have the resources to properly invest into safeguarding and producing the valley. Nevertheless, what did remain of the tribe of Issachar during the time of Deborah, which definitely was minimal, and probably up in the mountain holes and in the mice holes, whatever did remain of the tribe of Deborah, put all their efforts into assisting Deborah to inherit that portion of land once again. Okay, that's the point of the verse. Verse number 16, chapter 5, verse 16. Bob.
Why did you sit among the sheepfolds to hear the pipings for the flocks? The division of Reuben had great searchings of heart. Okay,
Reuben, as you can see on the map where their inheritance originally was in biblical Moab. Biblical Moab. And it corresponds to, in the scriptures, what's called the tableland. Reuben lived in the tableland of Moab, or the Medeba Plateau is part of that tableland. The openness of the plain where Reuben lived, the table where Reuben lived, made it very vulnerable to like a ping pong ball, that region that went back and forth between the different mice and the different cats. It changed hands, like I expressed, very often, and the local population, therefore, whoever lived there would have very mixed loyalties, since it's always going back and forth. And so if a new kid comes on the block and that new kid is strong and powerful, you're going to switch your loyalties to the new kid on the block, because you know the land that you live in is between a rock and a hard place, and you want to stay on the side of the winner. It is possible that the political climate in the region did not permit Reuben to participate in the battle in the previous chapter against Sisera. See, that's the problem in verse 16. Why did you abide among the sheepfolds? And then she goes on to say, the divisions of Reuben, there was great searching of heart, where, in other words, Reuben didn't show up for the battle in the previous chapter. And part of the reason why they didn't show up is why I explained about the mixed loyalties and the political climate there could have made it very difficult for them. What if they lost? Right? Then they have to come back, right, to Moab, which is between a rock and a hard place, and life could be very difficult for them. Attention is given here to the region's famous notoriety and history of sheep herding. They mentioned, don't they, the bleatings of the flocks in that region. And the region was so renowned for their sheep textile industry that hundreds of years later in 2 Kings chapter 3, Mesha, the king of Moab, has to pay Ahab's father, Omri, approximately 100,000 sheep a year in taxes. Now, he wouldn't give, Mesha would not give in Moab, which was once Reuben, 100,000 actual sheep to Omri, the house of Omri. What he would probably do is shear the sheep, and then send the textiles, right, to Omri, the house of Omri. And then what would the house of Omri then do with 100,000 textiles? Well, amongst other things, they would send probably a large portion of those textiles to Jezebel's hometown of Tyre and Sidon, which was renowned for coloring the textiles purple, right? Because he's got great contacts on the Phoenician coastal plain, because that's where his wife's from, and that's what they're renowned for. And then you color them purple, and then you send them to Macy's all over the eastern Mediterranean seaboard, and you've got tremendous revenue coming in, right? But it's all rooted or based in, right, the ability to tax Mesha, king of Moab, of 100,000 sheep. That's all in 2 Kings chapter 3, verse 4. Okay, there's a picture of that tableland today. Verse 17, Bob.
Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan. And why did Dan remain on ships? Asher continued at the seashore and stayed by his inlets.
Okay, so we continue with the author's disappointment of the tribes who didn't show up for the game. Dan would have brought, and you can see where Dan was located on the map, Dan would have brought foodstuffs. They would have exported wheat and barley and etc. to Tyre and Sidon on the Phoenician coastal plain. By the way, when you read, you'll often find a misnomer that the Via Maris, which of course is Latin for way of the sea, the Via Maris is often associated with what's called the international trunk route, the Great Trunk Route, the route that goes from Egypt through Israel, past Damascus, through the Tigris and Euphrates, right, down to that route. It's often called the Via Maris, which is a misnomer, because that is Latin for, obviously, the way of the sea. And the true Via Maris, the way of the sea, is from Caesarea Philippi. Well, that wasn't there at this time. Well, we'll just say the region of Dan, basically, west to Tyre and Sidon. Not a very long route. Okay, just like a Highway 90 kind of east-west route, right? That went from Tyre and Sidon to Dan. That's the true Via Maris. It's a misnomer today that the whole international highway is, but that's neither here nor there. But so Dan would bring foodstuffs to Tyre and Sidon on that plain and was exposed to great maritime activity. Why did Dan, you see in verse number 17, remain in ships? And probably Dan had much to lose economically if they cut ties with their business partners who were loyal to Sisera and loyal to Jabin, the king of the Canaanites, and to go fight against them. It would just be economic suicide to them. Also, the main Canaanite city center at Hatzor, which was located probably right about there, that's the epicenter right? The political, religious, administrative hub of the Canaanites in the whole north. So the location of Hatzor was smack dab in the way for the Danites to come down and join the fight. It's like they have to literally march their armies right past the lions dead. And they're totally outnumbered. All right, now Asher, we see next. Asher, you can see right there on the map, also lived in a region, in a territory that was also very loyal to Jabin. By the way, Jabin, when you read that name in the scripture, it's a dynastic name. It's like saying Caesar or Czar or something like that. And he, of course, is the king of the head of the Canaanites. And Sisera, as you probably recall, is like his, General MacArthur kind of guy. Okay? But those who live in Asher, they're also in a region where everyone who lives there is loyal to Jabin. And they're also living in a region where it would be very tempting because you're not in you're not in Shingletown Mountain, up in the slow-paced, tight-knit, conservative, hard-to-get-to region. You're on the coast, right? You're in San Francisco. So it's much easier to assimilate with your religion and with your culture and your politics with the Canaanites and with the sea people, because you're amongst them. Okay? So that's probably the reason why Dan and Asher didn't come. Okay? Verse number 18. Verse 18.
Zebulun was a people who despised their lives even to death, and Naphtali also on the high places of the field.
Okay. Now, unlike the previously mentioned tribes who were not permitted to come because of their commercial and their political connections to the Canaanites, or because of their physical setting, the tribes of Zebulun, we see here, and Naphtali risked life and limb. They risked life and limb to defend and to claim their land. Everything on the pages in the world of the Bible, guys, essentially everything is rooted or based in or revolves around land and family. Land and family. Land and family were the two staples of the fabric of society in the ancient Near East. Land and family, they defined, they shaped who you were as a people group and as an individual. To be without family and to be without land would be parallel to existing as a stranger in a strange land. You have no identity, you have no rights, you have no protection, you have no privileges, nothing. So everything is rooted or based in that. Which is funny because what does God tell Abraham to do, or Abram to do? Now the Lord said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. Leave your land, leave your family, leave the two staples, leave the fabric of your society behind, forsake it all, and go. And he kind of obeys, right? Because he's supposed to, right, get thee out of thy country from thy father's house, and what does he do? He brings his cousin, he brings his father with him. He's not supposed to do that, right? And then, right, it slows him down for 5 years probably at Haran, right on Highway 80. And Haran literally means crossroads, like, 80 and 5 kind of thing. Okay? Abraham wasn't perfect. But it's his faith. God honored his faith. Verse 19. Who's got that one? Lane?
Kings came, they fought, the kings of Canaan fought at Tanakh, by the waters of the Megiddo, but they carried off no silver, no plunder.
Okay, so we should understand Canaan and Tanakh here to be the poetic name of Harosheth. This is from the previous chapter. It's the poetic name, the Hebrew poetic name for Harosheth. which means the cultivated fields of the Gentiles. Now, the kings, quote unquote, mentioned here, are the other nations, are the other people groups who were allies of Jabin. Now, according to the Targum is kind of a commentary, I guess, a commentary on the Hebrew Scriptures, probably sometime in at the beginning of the rise of Islam. Okay, the Targum, according to that, the forces of Sisera reached from Haroshet, which you can see on the map, to Megiddo. That's how large his forces were. Apparently, the Canaanite forces who were allies to Jabin came and they fought. They did so at their own volition, and they did not apparently require the standard payment as mercenaries did at that time. Okay? You see that at the end of verse number 19. They took no gain of money. So apparently they forfeited their usual minimum fee to come and fight. Their reward was probably a love offering. Right? Whatever you see lying on the ground after the battle, it's yours. Take it. Any man or any woman, any clothing, anything, just take it. Right? All right, verse number 20. Bob.
They fought from the heavens. The stars from their courses fought against the Sisera.
Thank you. It is as if war, it seems from this verse, it is as if war was made from heaven upon Sisera. He's the seed of the serpent, and he is the oppressor of the people of God. The battle, or at least we find out here, the battle, but probably the final rounding up of any stragglers of the Canaanite forces. This apparently happened at nighttime, we see here. And the stars helped light the path of the pursuing Israelites. That's why it says the stars in their course fought against Sisera. That's probably what it means. Okay? So it kind of can, in our mind's eye, give us an approximate time duration of the battle. Right? Just a day. It seemed like the whole thing was in a day. Just, went into the, kind of maybe the wee hours of the night, right? To round up any of the loose stragglers. Verse number 21. Run.
The river of Kishon swept them away, that ancient river, the river of Kishon. O my soul, thou hast trodden down strength.
Okay, you see on the map here, here's Mount Carmel. The openings right here, Megiddo would be right here. And the Kishon is likely called the ancient river either because of its notoriety as a place of triumphal feats like this, like Elijah on Mount Carmel, right, slaughtering all the prophets of Baal at the Kishon. So maybe that's one reason why it's called the ancient river, because it's famous for these kind of feats. Or maybe because of its use in not only Hebrew, but just other Semitic people's poetry. Okay? So a well-known, famous river. Okay. Verse 22. Verse 22, Mark.
And the horses' hoofs beat from the dashing of his valiant steeds.
Okay, so because of the unexpected rainfall, the battlefield was essentially reduced to a marshy swamp. The chariots became a hindrance, and the startled war horses stumbled and fell and lost their footings. That's why it says at the end of verse 22, the hoofs were broken by the means of prancing the prancing of the mighty ones, the horses stumbled and fell, they lost their footing in the mud. And as we mentioned from a previous lecture, there's I think it's a 19th century account of a Christian pilgrim who went to the Valley of Jezreel during the rainy season, and she got off of the main track that you take to go through the valley, and her donkey sunk up to its eyeballs. It was so swampy and so marshy. So that somewhat modern example, right, can kind of give you, that it is possible that physically can happen, because we not only says it in the text, but you see it with your own eyes. Verse number 23. Lane.
Curse me, Ra, said the angel of the Lord. Curse his people bitterly, because they did not come to help the Lord against the mighty.
Okay, so Deborah emphatically curses the inhabitants of Meroz. Now, they were apparently Israelites, and they were probably located near one of the 7 entrances or exits of the Valley of Jezreel, but for whatever reason, like Dan, like Asher, like Reuben, they did not send any reinforcements to the battle. Now, the exact identification of Meroz is a mystery. It's as mysterious as Melchizedek. It has eluded geographers, though some suggest that it might be identified with a site near Dotan, which is right here, and one of the 7 entrances and or exits. So one of the reasons why is Jerome, the 4th century church historian, was also a geographer. And in his time, there was a city right around Dotan called Marus, which is, in regards to etymology, very close to Meroz, Marus. And it's an option. Verse number 24.
Most blessed among women is Jael, the wife of Heber, the Kenite. Blessed is she among women in tents.
Okay, whereas in the previous verse, the inhabitants of Meroz are cursed for their lack of courage to assist the Israelites in battle, Yael is blessed for hers. Okay. We won't spend any more time on the Kenites, as you wish. We talked about them extensively in the previous lecture. Verse number 25, Ron.
He asked for water, she gave him milk. In a magnificent bowl, she brought him curds.
Okay, so the Hebrew word for milk, chalab, it generally corresponds to a kind of milk which has had rennet added to it to curdle it, and has been left to go sour by fermentation, and it results in something like, I don't know, maybe yogurt. So what you would do is you would take this that you can see on the screen, that sheepskin, where its 4 members has been sewn to seal it, where the neck would be, you gotta do what you can do and use the resources you have in the desert, right? And so where the neck would be the spout. And what you would do then is you would milk the sheep or the goats, right? And then you would put the milk into the skin, and you would let it ferment, and then you would shake it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that process would help curdle it. And then you would let it sit in the sun. And that is, a delicacy, I guess. But nevertheless, displaying very good ancient Near Eastern hospitality, Yael brings him milk with cream on top. Or she skimmed the cream off the top of what was probably sitting in the sun or in there. And after serving him milk, she presents the butter on a dish for the aim of comforting his heart and helping him fall fast asleep. What's the easiest way to a man's heart? Right? They say his stomach. Okay. Verse number 26.
She reached out her hand for the tin pig, and her right hand for the workman's hammer. Then she struck Sisera. She smashed his head, and she shattered and pierced his temple.
Okay, so did Yael, like David later did, after defeating the seed of the serpent, take the dead man's sword and use his own sword to cut off that guy's head? By the way, what's kind of interesting is in the King James, Goliath, his height is 6 cubits in a span. 6 cubits in a span. The height of his sword or his spear is 6 cubits, and the weight of his mail or his armor is 5,000. But other texts say a different reading. Can you guess? 6,000 or 6 talents was the weight of the nail. So you have a very nice, don't you? You have a very nice picture, a word picture. The numerology builds in there, right? That this is like the ultimate seed of the serpent, Goliath. That's a possible reading, that she took the sword from the dead Sisera and knocked off his own head. Or it was possible that she just struck the nail right through the tenderest part of his head. As mentioned earlier, we have a vivid portrayal of the seed of the woman cutting off the head of the snake, which just goes throughout the whole, a light thread that goes throughout the whole scriptures. Right? What does Paul even in the New Testament say? God will crush Satan's head under your feet shortly. You read at the last chapter of Romans, that whole motif. Okay? Verse 27. Bob?
At her feet he sank, he fell, he lay still. At her feet he sank, he fell. Where he sank, there he fell dead.
Okay, it seems we have some more data here on what happened. Possibly after the first blow of the 10th stake into his temple, it seems from this verse that he arose. I mean, that would kind of be natural in a way. I mean, reacting. And then he vowed not to come up again after the second blow. So it's possible that there, I guess it really doesn't matter, 2, right? 2 times that she gave him in the head. Of course, what coming into the woman's tent was a horrific breach in ancient Near Eastern hospitality, and the end of the agreement, the security agreement, the economic agreement between her and Jabin. But certainly the end justified the means. Verse number 28. Ron?
The mother of Sisera looked out at a window and cried to Boaz, "Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the wheels of his chariots?"
Okay, so the mother of Sisera, probably at Harosheth, that seems to be their kind of Fort Knox for the Canaanites in the valley. The mother of Sisera obviously expected her son to enjoy the rewards of the presumed victory. But as days started to set, her hopes turned into fears in this verse. Right? Why are the wheels of his chariots tarrying? Why is his chariot taking so long in coming? Yeah, I expected him to be gone much longer than the actual battle took place because he's going to reap the benefits of the bounty. Now, the latter end of the verse in the Targum, remember once again, not only the Aramaic reading of the Hebrew Bible, but a lot of commentary on the Bible. And after the rise of Islam. It's probably 6th, 7th, 8th century, something like that. The latter end of the verse in the Targum adds something here, and it says, "Why are the runners hindered? Who should bring me a letter of victories?" Now, whether that should be in our Bibles or not, I don't know, but it's just a little more data. It's basically, she's just saying, it's the same complaint. Why has my son been delayed? He should be home celebrating the battle by now. Verse number 29, Mark.
Her wise princess would answer her. Indeed, she repeats her words to herself.
In other words, the ruling elite, the friends of the mother of Sisera, okay? The ruling elite, they apparently gathered together at the mother of Sisera's house the night of the battle to hopefully congratulate her on her son's apparent victory. But I should say before they could speak a word of encouragement to her, she answered why her son was being delayed. Verse number 30. Lane.
Are they not finding in dividing the spoils a girl or two for each man? Colorful garments as plunder for Sisera. Colorful garments embroidered, highly embroidered garments for my neck. All this as plunder.
Okay, so Sisera's mother is suggesting that her son was late because of the valuable clothing taken in the spoil of the Israelites. Now, similar clothing is later mentioned, the needlework of gold, is mentioned in the context of the apparel worn by those who reside in palaces. This is from Psalm 45:13. All glorious is the princess within her chamber, her gown is interwoven with gold. She also suggests, well, before I get there, remember that one of the means wherewith to signify your wealth in the ancient Near East was clothing. That's why, for example, like in James chapter 5, he says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded." So you have riches, garments, and precious metals. Seem to be the three indicators of what your wealth was. Okay. So she also suggests that he's delayed because he's taking a damsel or two, when in fact he fell into the hand of a damsel, Yael, or two, Deborah. And finally, verse number 31, Bob.
Thus let all your enemies perish, O Lord, but let those who love him be like the sun, when it comes out in full strength. So the land had rest for 40 years.
Okay, thank you. The timing, the geopolitical timing for Israel to recapture the Valley of Jezreel from the Canaanite forces was perfect, was divine. Since, remember, at this time, which we previously mentioned, at this time Egypt, which normally was the cat who walked up and down Highway 80 in the Valley of Jezreel, and could have been in cahoots with the house of Jabin. Egypt at this time was ruled by the previously mentioned usurper from Syria, who did not have the necessary military and economic resources to govern properly the Valley of Jezreel. And the next Pharaoh, Pharaoh Seth-Necht, he did. And so he quickly restored Canaan under Egyptian rule. And but he was followed by the mighty Ramses III, who ruled for 31 long years, 1198 to 1167 probably, during the time of the settling of the Philistines on the eastern Mediterranean seaboard. So every